was watching a video that I saw that was a clip from an actual conference that I went to several years ago. So Wayne Dyer, before he passed away, he did in Austin, he did an You Can Do It conference, and there was lots of really good speakers there. And I was so blessed to know that I could see him before he passed away. And so one of the things he was talking about was 10 spiritual principles. And I was running across a video the other day, and somebody had a clip of that particular thing. And I thought, this is something that I think that a lot of people could use. And so I'm going to go over those principles and really kind of talk to you about it in a little bit more depth. And each one is going to be a segment. So there's 10 spiritual principles, and these principles will really help you with, whatever it is your religion is or whatever it is that you believe. It really doesn't matter. This is about the fulfillment within you. So these principles will help you feel a lot happier. And if you can just kind of take each one of these and focus on each one and just take some time before you go to the next one, okay? Maybe take a couple of days, perhaps, however you want to do it. You can take a day, you can take an hour, but I really want you to really think about it. And also to go back and re-listen to it and listen to it again and really kind of work on, like write it down and make note of it and think about it, absorb it, and see how you can actually practice this in your life, okay? So the first one is have an open mind and be attached to nothing. Now, I made some notes here, so you might see me kind of looking down a little bit because I want to make sure that I'm covering everything that this is about. So having an open mind, what does that mean? Well, a lot of times what happens is that we have, majority of us, have a very closed mind about a lot of things. We believe something and that's the absolute. And I've noticed this as a species, humans do this. It's an absolute, that's their truth. And if you think about back in time, the people that were open-minded were the ones that progressed. And the people that were closed-minded are the ones that didn't. So look at like the invention of the airplane. And when the Wright brothers were actually, trying out all these experiments, everybody was closed-minded about it and they were making fun of them. But look, here we are now. We use airplanes for transportation to get all over the world. So this having an open mind and not be so closed off to things, just because you perceive something a certain way doesn't necessarily mean that is that may be your truth, but doesn't mean it's the truth. And truth is a very subjective thing. It's about what you've experienced in your life at that moment. And you're basing all of your knowledge and all of your thoughts and all your beliefs on either something that somebody has shared with you and they told you was their truth, or it's about what you've experienced. But what if you haven't experienced very much? Maybe you haven't learned something else. So if you can keep yourself open to new experiences and new thoughts and new ideas. Now, I found that a lot of times in relationships, this is where we become the most closed-minded and we become very attached to the outcome. And when I say attached to the outcome, what I'm saying is that if that person doesn't buy into what you're saying or agree with you 100%, then it turns into a huge fight. And sometimes we're fighting over stupid stuff, like how often to clean the cat litter, or how much electricity is being used by turning on the lights and leaving them on, for 10 minutes. And so, it can be a debate. I mean, I've actually had this debate with my husband over and over again, where he feels like that he should open up the windows in the house and he's running the AC at the same time. And yet he will trip out if I left the light on. Like, honestly, it makes no sense. But I wanted to convince him that his theory didn't make any sense to me, because the actual AC is working harder and using a lot more electricity when you have the windows open. So why is he bickering over a silly light being on for 5 minutes because I walked into the kitchen and forgot to turn it off? And so here's where the thing is that if I am going to be attached to the outcome, which is him agreeing with me, then suddenly what ends up happening is that I can get upset, because I want him to believe the way I want him to believe. And perhaps he doesn't want to believe that way. Perhaps he's not ready to believe that way because he's convinced that opening up the AC, opening up the windows gives him a sense of pleasure. And so he doesn't want to he wants to save in other areas so that he can have that pleasure. It's kind of like when you're saving money, you're like, I'm willing to give up my frappuccinos in the morning so that I can have save to go on a vacation or something like that. I'm willing to give this up for this. And perhaps that from his perspective, that's what he was looking at. But from my perspective, I was looking at dollars and cents. I was like, okay, you're literally like spending much more money in this area, and this is a greater chunk that we could really reduce it down, quite a bit. But who's right or wrong here? Well, it really doesn't matter. The thing is that if you're attached to the outcome, then suddenly it's going to create a fight. And as long as you're closed-minded to somebody else's ideas or thoughts or beliefs or concepts or desires, then you're closed off to that relationship. So I was talking to one of my clients the other day, and she was talking about her relationship and how she gets really angry with her husband, and how everything he does upsets her, and they get into these arguments about things that she doesn't see any logic in, and she thinks it's really stupid. And so he goes off and he goes on a cleaning binge, and he literally like cleans out everything in the garage, and he gets rid of their sander. And then suddenly they need a sander for something, and she goes looking for it, and he said he threw it away. And now they have to go out and buy a new sander. And so she was pretty upset about it. So it was like, so I asked her, I said, so like when you guys do not agree on something and he is arguing with you, how does that make you feel? And when she was telling me how she felt like that. She said that, I asked her, I was like, how does it make you feel when he doesn't agree with you? And she said, rejected. And I said, okay, let's flip the page for a second. I said, because he doesn't, I said, so if you're not agreeing with him on something that he's done, are you rejecting him? And she said, no. And I said, okay, so then why are you feeling rejected? You see, it works both ways. Just because somebody doesn't agree with you doesn't necessarily mean that they're rejecting you. So when you close your mind off and you're attached to the outcome, and you're not looking at things from new perspectives and new ideas and new beginnings and new thoughts and a journey that you can learn something from, you close yourself off to growing, to experiencing, to loving. So it is absolutely impossible to grow, to have progress, if you're always doing things the same way. If you don't learn new things, if you don't explore, if you don't research, if you're just really attached to a belief. And sometimes we get attached to beliefs because it's the way we were raised. It's the way that we were taught. But just because you were taught something doesn't necessarily mean that that's the best way. And sometimes if you explore different ways, then you can find that there's other ways that don't create so much havoc. So, and a good example of that is spanking, for example. A lot of parents were spanked. And in my generation, it was called spanking. And if you were to do corporal punishment like we did in my generation when I was growing up, you would probably have CPS called and all the kids would be taken away. But when I was growing up, it was an acceptable thing. So a lot of times parents, they basically mimic the same behaviors that the parents did. And they were like, well, that's how I was raised. That's how my dad did it. And I turned out just fine. But as people change and generations change and life changes and laws change, you've got to learn how to adapt with that. And sometimes there's a better way. I found that when I was raising my daughter, um, the thing that really seemed to work with her the very best was to put her in a room and make her process what it was she was doing. And by thinking about it, she was able to actually calm herself down and move herself into a different state of mind. Now, that worked out best for her. And if I would have taken on the concept of, how my parents raised, me, my mom would get a switch from a tree and sometimes even make us go pick it out. Or she would hang a wooden spoon in the kitchen and she'd start waving it around and she would use that for our punishment. My dad would pull his belt off and start, cracking it like a whip. And so I can look at that and kind of laugh about it. But if I say to myself, well, that's how my parents did it, and it doesn't work for my child, and it's only causing her create more craziness. And in fact, I'll tell you a little secret. I actually spanked her one time and she went crazy. I mean, not so crazy. Like her head started spinning around and green stuff started spitting out of her mouth. I mean, it was like almost like she was possessed. And I was like, okay, this doesn't work on her. And with my son, all I had to do, I didn't have to send him to his room. All I had to do was give him this look. Taylor. And I'd give him that look and I just drew the calm face and just put my finger up like that and say, look at me. That is not acceptable behavior. And he would just, big old fat tear would come running down his eyes, and that was it. That's all he took. Each person requires something different. And if I wasn't open to new ideas and new thoughts and new ways, and I was very attached to how I had to do it because my parents did it this way, then I wouldn't know how to work with my children and what's best for each one of them. So when you're talking about relationships, you're talking about children, you're talking about work, you're talking about all the conflicts and the issues and the problems that we have in life, and everything that is all learned. However, there's other ideas and there's other ways, and by opening yourself up to new ways of thinking, even spiritually, like I get a lot of people that come to see me and they say, and I ask them, I'm like, well, do you meditate? And they go, no, I can't calm my head down long enough to do it. Well, that is literally when you say I can't do something, you're really saying I'm choosing not to, because there's not a person out there that can't meditate. All you have to do is just decide that you're going to learn how to master your mind, and you start doing it. And I always tell people, like, look, I can teach you how to meditate. That's not a problem. And there hasn't been anyone that I've worked with that I've taught how to meditate that couldn't do it. I mean, it's a really simple thing. All you have to do is just focus on your breath and do it for 5 minutes. That's it. Really, really simple. Now, there's more advanced techniques on meditating, but by closing yourself off and being very closed off and not being open to learning, then you're taking away the experience that could have calmed down your anxiety. Now, being open to new ideas, new concepts, new ways of looking at things. So as you guys have seen, you've probably seen me a couple of times on the Jeff Dowry show, and he has a different view on the Bible, for example. And what he does is he looks at the original text, like the Hebrew text or the Greek text, and he looks at the original writings and the original words and what that means. And when you do that, it changes the whole meaning of everything. And there's so many people sometimes when I'm watching some of his other shows and he's talking about stuff, and there's people in the chat room that are just flying off the handle. They're like quoting scriptures and they're saying this and they're saying that. And they're very, very attached to a meaning or a belief. And he's trying to tell everybody, look, okay, this is the word, here's the original word, and here's what the original word means. I'm not making this up. Here's BibleHub.com. I'm showing it to you on the screen. I'm sharing my screen and I'm showing you. And people get very, very attached to something because they're taking what's happening is taking away their joy that they feel, their belief. It's like, oh my God, you're cracking my belief. And sometimes that hurts to crack a belief. So, but if you find that you allow yourself to be more open and you allow yourself to listen to somebody else, it may not be your perception at the time, but in some point in time, it may change. And just by being open doesn't mean that you have to agree. It just means you're open. Like, somebody will say something to me and they'll say, well, have you heard about this book and how this person teaches this? And I'll say, well, no, I haven't, but tell me about it. And so they'll share their concept or their belief, or what they read and how they feel it touched them. And I will tell them that I appreciate that they're actually open to new ideas and thoughts and everything. And sometimes in those times, I actually end up learning something myself because I'm like very open to it. I'm not like, well, okay, hold on. Now we're doing it my way. Okay. And I don't want you interfering with other stuff. Now, granted, there are times where sometimes people are doing things that does interfere. And I'm not closed off to other people doing those things. Like, I had a client that came to me and she was so ready to transform that she was taking on like 30 different programs at one time. And she sat down with me and she was like, okay, everything you just asked me to do, I've already done with this other program. And I'm like, yeah, but I'm doing it for a different reason. After talking to her, I ended up realizing that this was a huge conflict. So what I said was, how much longer do you have before you finish this class? And she said 4 weeks. And I said, here's what I want you to do. I want you to finish that, and I want you to give all your heart, your soul, your mind, and everything to that. Be very open to learning and exploring and figuring out everything that you can through this program. And then when you're done, you come back to me and we're going to be doing something a little bit different. We might be using the same tools, but we're going to have a different outcome. So I didn't discourage what she was doing and say, no, you just paid me to do this, so we're doing it my way. I didn't discount what they were doing, even though it didn't, to me, I felt like what we were going to accomplish was going to be much faster, much deeper, much more to the point. I didn't do that. I was like, go ahead and experience that. And then bring back to me what you've learned, and let's see how this can help you, because it might actually aid you in some of the things that we're going to be doing together. And I really admire that you're stretching out, you're reaching out, you're really trying to learn as much as you can. But let's do one thing at a time instead of 5 things, okay? So being open-minded, attached to an outcome. Oh my God, when we are so attached to something, it can create so many obstacles in our life. If you can just merely detach yourself from what you feel needs to happen, you will find so much more happiness in your life. If you can just let go of that attachment, it's like, it has to be this way. And, I learned over time with my husband that I couldn't be attached to an outcome, because he was never going to do things the way I wanted him to do it. And because, I'm a life coach and a spiritual teacher and all this other stuff, I'm the master. So you should listen to me, I know how to overcome these things, and everything you're doing right now is not working. And I felt that I was absolutely attached to the outcome of him doing it my way. And let me just tell you, it didn't work out very well. So when I decided to let go of that and detach myself from where I felt that he needed to be. So I'm going to read something off to you that might help, because when I let go of that, oh my God, I had so much more peace. And now we just kind of laugh about it. I mean, he'll say something and I'll just go, you do you and I'll do me, okay? And he just laughs and says, okay. And I'm like, hey, if that works for you, then it works for you. And I feel like sometimes that he should stand up for himself a little bit more in certain situations. And I feel like that he should back down on certain situations where he's going a little bit overboard. But yet that's how I run my life. And that's how I run, how I do things. He doesn't necessarily do it that way, and he's got his reasons for it. And that's okay. And I accept that. And when I finally decided to just let him be him and me be me, it was this most amazing peace that came over our relationship, and so much love, because I'm not feeling threatened by the fact that he's not buying into what it is that I want him to do. It's like, do whatever. That's fine. If that's what makes you happy. So I want you to listen to these words, okay? And kind of say them out loud and see if you can kind of make them resonate, okay? I'm not really attached to you at all. Oh, wow. Think about that. What does attached mean? Okay, think about it for a second. I'm not really attached to you at all. I am merely deluding myself into the belief that without you, I will not be happy. That really hits home with a lot of people. I'm deluding myself into the belief that without you, I will not be happy. Okay, so here's the big kicker. So I leave you free to be yourself, to think your own thoughts, to indulge in your own pleasures and tastes, to follow your inclinations, to follow your heart in your own ways, in which you decide are to your own liking. When I heard Wayne Dyer actually say that, I was actually profoundly touched, because it really hit home for me. Is allowing a person just to be them. It's like, you be you, I'll be me. And sometimes we don't always go about things the same way, and sometimes we don't always agree. But, like my friend Jeff, sometimes I watch a show and I just bust out laughing because of the way that he does things or the things he says, and I get a big kick out of it. It's really funny. But I don't always necessarily go, I'm not sure that I agree there. But who cares? Who cares? I mean, it really doesn't matter, because he may know more than I do. So what I did was, instead of, you know, writing stuff on his wall and the YouTube posts and stuff and saying, I don't know, blah, 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 I decided that I sent him a message and said, hey, I think we need to have a conversation about this, because I want to know where you're getting this from. And I need some clarity on it, because I seem to be thinking slightly different than you, and I really would like to have this conversation about that. So we decided to do a show on it. So actually, it's going to be tonight, and hopefully we're able to go over this conversation. And it doesn't mean that I'm wrong, and it doesn't mean that he's right, and it doesn't mean that, in my point here is not to prove that he's wrong. And I'm going into this with a very open mind. In fact, I even tried to do some research. I started looking at different terminologies and all this other stuff so I could kind of like really like process where he was getting this, and I found myself even more confused. And that's why I felt that it was something that I needed to do, was to actually, get some clarity on this. And I think it's going to be actually kind of fun. And you look at it from that perspective, it's like, look at it as like a debate. Look at it like, well, what about this? And you kind of bring some light to the situation. But I may be walking out of there going, you know what, you're right. Or he could be walking out of this going, all this time I was wrong. And it really doesn't matter. And we might actually walk out of this like, he's like, I still believe this. And I'm like, I still haven't been convinced. And then we're going to shake hands and say, okay, we're cool. You do you, and I'll do me. So I'm not attached to convincing him, and my self-worth has nothing to do with whether or not he believes the way I believe or doesn't. It holds no value. What holds value is you being happy and you presenting yourself in such a way that your happiness is not determined by somebody else's thoughts. Your happiness should not be determined on somebody else's thoughts. I've had people say to me, well, I'm a people pleaser. Well, I'm like, great, so am I. But I please because I want to, because it makes me feel fulfilled, not because their reaction to it makes me fulfilled. Like, I may do something and not get a reaction, but I feel good about it. And I feel like I'm putting an effort out there. I'm doing something that's worthwhile. I'm doing something that has meaning. So I'm making decisions in my life that benefit me, that make me feel good. So what about you? Why are you doing it? Are you doing it because you want some kind of reaction? Because if you're doing it for a reaction, then you've just taken it all away. I mean, there's no meaning behind it if that's the case. I mean, that's just fake. You're not doing it because you really feel that way. It's like if you decided to bake cookies for somebody and you went to a lot of trouble to bake it, and you're expecting them to jump up and down and say, oh my God, you're such a kind person, thank you so much, you're so sweet, you just, oh my God, I can't believe you're so thoughtful. Maybe that's the reaction you want. But maybe that day that person was like on a diet, or maybe they were just not feeling it. Like they would just want, their cat had just gotten ran over, and they were just appreciative, but not to the level you wanted. And let's say they just said, well, thank you so much for baking those cookies. And you're just like, oh, that's all? I just spent hours in there and I made these from scratch. Well, so now your whole self-worth is like, well, God, I didn't make them happy. I just, I bake them cookies, and I'm always going in and I always mow their side of the when I mow my grass, I just go ahead and mow theirs too, because and I don't, and every time I go outside to walk my dog and I pick up the poop, I see that somebody else left poop in their yard and I pick it up too. But, you know, every time they're walking the dog, they never pick up their own poop or somebody else's dog. And I've never seen them mow my grass. Well, that means you're attached to an outcome. You see, if you're doing something out of the kindness of your heart, you shouldn't have any expectations behind it. So the words here are have an open mind and be attached to nothing. Be open to explore new ideas, thoughts, experiences in life, different perceptions. Be open to somebody else's thoughts. It doesn't mean you have to agree. It just means that you're not shutting them down and not saying, absolutely not. This is not what I believe, and I absolutely won't do it. Having an open mind is to not pressure somebody into something that you believe and forcing them. Having an open mind is to explore somebody else's belief. Having an open mind doesn't mean that you have to be a victim. It just means that you're not judging. You're not black or white. You're not holding that thought hostage. See, when you do that, then what ends up happening is you can't grow. You can't, there's no progress that can happen here, you guys. There's no progress. So what I want you to do is I want you to really process this, okay? Think about it. Have an open mind and be attached to nothing. This is part 1 of this 10 spiritual principles. This is Michelle Thompson. And remember, you guys, subscribe, please. I am fairly new to YouTube, so I am trying to build up my YouTube followers. So I'd really appreciate it if you like the video and subscribe. It would really make me super happy because I would like this message to go out to more people. And the more subscribers I have, the more it gets kind of put up in the front. And when people are researching and looking, and they're able to find these messages, and we're able to share it. So if you could just subscribe and hit like, that would just make my day. You have an awesome day, and just be you. You be you, and I'll be me. Have a wonderful day. Don't forget to subscribe.